All right, guys. Well, I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but this whole Buzzfeed report about Trump coercing Michael Cohen to lie to Congress is not going to go anywhere. I know. Wah, wah. It's really not. This is just going to fizzle out and fade, just like every other report that has come out in the last 2 years. And let me explain why. First of all, we don't even know if it's true. Okay, there's that. But let's just say it is true. Let's say it is true. Okay, well, one, subordination of perjury. This is what everyone's talking about. This is the big fancy word that they're using and splashing all over media, and everyone's saying, oh my gosh, if Trump committed this subordination of perjury, then, you know, this is a felony and this is bad. And by the way, I feel like they use all of these really fancy terms because really all it means is just coercing someone to lie under oath. And under oath, obviously, is, you know, you can't lie under oath. So that's against the law. Coercing someone to lie under oath is against the law. The way you could coerce someone in this case, for example, would be you're their boss and you're essentially threatening them. You're threatening their job. You're threatening their pay. You're threatening their livelihood, making them feel like if they don't do it, they're going to lose something. So they kind of weigh their options and they feel like, okay, well, it's better to lie under oath and hopefully not get caught than it is to lose my livelihood, right? So that's kind of subordination of perjury. But the thing is, the person has to actually commit perjury in order for you to be charged with subordination of perjury. And Michael Cohen wasn't charged with perjury. So there can't be subordination of perjury without perjury. That's the crime actually goes with the other crime. You can't have one without the other. So Michael Cohen was actually charged with lying to Congress, but it wasn't perjury. It was very specific. His crime was a violation of federal false statement statute. So it's a crucial distinction. Perjury is reserved for when someone knowingly lies under oath, okay? While the federal false statement statute applies to anyone who knowingly makes materially false, fictitious, or fraudulent statements or representations in dealings with the federal government, even if no oath was sworn. So there is a bit of a difference. So you can't suborn perjury without the person committing perjury. And I feel like they use these fancy terms in order to make us feel like they can't, we can't do their fancy job. It's like, just use plain English, right? It's lying under oath and convincing somebody to lie under oath. So he didn't even do that. Now, Trump would be guilty of coercing Cohen to lie to Congress, which is not subordination of perjury, but it is a similar crime, and it is also a crime. So that's bad. It's really bad. You cannot do that. But here's the thing. Trump wasn't the one who committed the perjury. He wasn't the one who lied to Congress. And this is important because we've actually had American presidents commit perjury, and we've also had American presidents commit obstruction of justice, and nothing happened to them. Bill Clinton. Bill Clinton is a great example of this. Bill Clinton was impeached for perjury and obstruction of justice. And what was the outcome of that impeachment? Exactly. And he was the one who actually did it. He wasn't coercing someone else to do it. He did it. So if we can't even get a president to face consequences, real consequences for obstruction of justice and perjury, then what makes us think we're going to get a president for getting someone else to do it? It's you could maybe, Watergate was a different example because Nixon, in that case, for one, he was dumb enough to tape himself. So it was a smoking gun because there was actual audio tape of him talking and covering up the crime. So that is very different because it's not speculative. It's not he said versus he said or she said, or, it was an actual audio recording. There was no way to deny it. It was, you said it. It's right here. But is that even going to really deter Trump's base? I mean, even if there was an audio recording of him telling Michael Cohen, you know what, just go to Congress, tell them what they need to know. Don't say this, that, or the other, just keep it to this. Even if there was an audio recording of this, his base isn't going to care. And that is the main third point. of why this isn't going to go anywhere, because his base doesn't care. And if his base doesn't care, do you really think that the senators, the Republican senators and the Republican reps are going to care? That you think they're going to want to go forward with impeachment proceedings and try to remove Trump from office? No, they're not, because they're going to go along with their base. And if the base is turning Trump into a martyr over this, then believe me, the rest of the Republican senators and the Republican reps are going to just fall in line. And they're just going to say that this is a witch hunt and this is outrageous. And it is going to be very similar to what happened with Bill Clinton, which was really a big stain on our nation, really unnecessary, and just move on, right? They were going after Bill Clinton for something completely different. They stumbled on a sex scandal. They decided to try to get him for that. And it sounds really similar here. We're trying to get Trump for being a Putin puppet, not for being a liar. We already know he's a liar. So getting him for lying and trying to get him in a room with Mueller, for example, so that he can answer questions and we can say, aha, we got you for lying. We already know the guy's a liar. And him lying is not the point. We're trying to get him for being a Putin puppet, not for being a liar. So the whole thing is really reminiscent of Bill Clinton in the 90s. And do we really want to walk down that road again? No, I don't think so. I think what we want is a smoking gun. We want to know for sure that he's compromised, that he is a Putin puppet, if that's what we're going for. Now, I don't think he's a Putin puppet so much as I think he's greedy. That's what I think all of this is about. I just think Trump is greedy. And I think greed can get you. Greed can get you, for sure. I'm not saying that the guy's, not going to tumble and fall. That's possible. But it will be about greed. And here's the whole thing. So if you don't even know what this is all about, because I had to do my research to figure out what are they even talking about? Like, what did Michael Cohen lie about? And what did Trump potentially get him to lie about? Okay, so it came down to this. Basically, Trump was a businessman, as we know, building buildings all around the world and wanting to build more buildings around the world. And one place he set his sights on was Moscow. He wanted to build a Trump Tower in Moscow, but it's difficult to do. A lot of places in the world, you can't just show up and try to build. You got to go through the government. The government is difficult, and that's what the issue was. So he'd been wanting to build this tower in Moscow for a long time. And at the same time, he was obviously vocal in American politics, right? I mean, he was like the big birth certificate guy, the birther guy, and and just always being very vocal politically and hanging out with politicians. And so those two cross paths, obviously, when you decide to run for office and you're an international business person conducting business with foreign governments all around the world. This is bound to create conflict. But you have to remember, Trump didn't think he was even going to win, right? Remember, we all said that. This guy looked like he was shocked he had won. He didn't think he was going to win. And all of these insiders in the first few months of his presidency, they were all coming out saying Trump didn't think he was going to win and Melania didn't think he was going to win, and they were all shocked. So keep that in mind with all of this. He didn't think he was going to win. So he's building buildings around the world. He wants to build a building in Moscow. He's trying to work with Moscow in order to get that done. And trying to meet with Putin or trying to meet with other people in Moscow. At the same time, his other half decides, the other half of his schizophrenic personality decides that he wants to become president of the United States, not taking into consideration the conflict that there might be there. So he begins running. And sure, they were in talks still with all of the different governments that they were in talks with trying to build these buildings. And the whole thing came down to the American people wanted to know if he was still talking to Putin and Moscow or Russians in general about building a building in Russia during the election. And he kept saying no. He kept saying no. I ended up in January before he snagged the GOP nomination. That's what it came down to. Before he was the nominated Republican guy, was he talking to Russia, Putin and all those people? And he kept saying no. Cohen was saying also no. Truth was he was still in talks with Russia about building a building because the guy's greedy. You think he was just going to shut it down and say, well, now I'm running for president, so I've got to divest myself of every business operation I'm in? He still hasn't done that. So he didn't do it then either. So, of course, he continued on trying to build buildings because, again, he didn't think he was going to win. So he thought, why stop? I don't think I'm going to win. My life has got to keep going. So that was the issue, was he continued to be in talks. His kids continued to be in talks. Michael Cohen continued to be in talks with Russians all the way up until the summer of 2016 before the election, while he was the GOP nomination. And probably during those talks, when he didn't think he was going to win, he was making false promises like he does all the time to us. I'm sure he was saying to Russians, oh yeah, if I win, I'll give you X, Y, and Z. That's clearly a problem. It's not okay, and I'm not making an excuse for it. I'm just explaining how this probably happened. And maybe you did say, yeah, okay, we'll change our stance on the Ukraine. We'll change our stance on NATO. We'll change our stance on this, that, and the other, because ultimately the guy wants to build a building in Moscow. That's what he wants. And he's still thinking about this kind of thing because, you know what, you can only be president for an 8-year term max, right? You've got 2 4-year terms maximum, and then you're out of there. So you've got to have a life after the presidency. And Trump's thinking he'll just go back to his old life, but this time it'll be bigger and better than ever. So that's really what all of this comes down to. And what they're going to say, what his base is going to say about all that is, how can you blame the guy? He was a businessman. He didn't think he was going to win. Of course, he was still trying to strike deals, and it doesn't matter because then he won the presidency, and then he stopped all of that, and he no longer, he's not a Putin puppet. He was no longer making those deals, no longer making promises, and yada, 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 yada. And they're going to turn him into a martyr if we try to go down this road. So we need to have a smoking gun, like an actual recording of him talking to Putin saying, okay, I'll give you, I'll back us out of NATO in exchange for the building in Moscow. There's got to be a smoking gun. And that's what we're missing. So until we get it, we can continue to have hysteria over these new revelations that keep coming out. And then we can continue to be disappointed when they absolutely go nowhere.